The morning light filtered through the massive dome of the Galactic Institute of Applied Sciences as students from dozens of worlds gathered in the main lecture hall. Professor Zixthara stood at the front of the room, her tall crystalline body catching the light and throwing rainbow patterns across the walls. She was one of the most respected teachers at the Institute, known throughout the galaxy for her tough but fair approach to engineering education. Kevin Murphy sat in his usual spot near the back of the room, his human eyes taking in the incredible diversity of his classmates. There was Velkar, a student from the insect world of Cathura, whose 6 arms allowed him to take notes at incredible speed. Next to him sat Aquilin, whose water-filled environmental suit kept her amphibious body comfortable in the dry atmosphere. The gas-being student Zephyr floated in a contained field, occasionally shifting colors as emotions passed through his ethereal form. Kevin had been at the Institute for 2 years now, one of only 3 humans in the advanced engineering program. Earth had only recently joined the galactic community, and human students were still rare in the prestigious academies scattered across known space. Most of his alien classmates had been polite but distant, unsure what to make of the newcomers from the small blue planet on the outer rim. Professor Zixthara's voice resonated through the universal translator, reaching every student in their native language. Today marks your final practical examination for advanced survival engineering, she announced, her 6 limbs moving gracefully as she gestured toward the massive holographic display behind her. This test will determine whether you truly understand the fundamental principles we have studied this semester. The hologram showed a barren asteroid floating in space, its rocky surface scarred by countless impacts from cosmic debris. The professor's voice continued as the image rotated slowly, revealing the harsh landscape that awaited them. You will each be assigned a section of asteroid designation XK739 in the neutral testing zone. Your task is simple yet essential. Construct a basic survival shelter capable of protecting 1 individual for 72 standard hours against Class 2 environmental hazards. Kevin felt his pulse quicken as he studied the asteroid's surface. His human brain automatically began processing the visual information, noting the mineral deposits visible in the rock formations, the way shadows fell across potential excavation sites, and the distribution of what appeared to be underground water sources. While his classmates saw a challenging but straightforward assignment, Kevin's mind was already racing with possibilities. The professor continued her explanation, outlining the tools and materials that would be provided. Each student would receive a standard excavation kit, basic atmospheric processors, emergency food supplies for 1 week, and a communication device for emergencies only. The challenge was designed to test their ability to create functional shelter. Using minimal resources and their own ingenuity. Around the room, students began discussing their approaches in hushed tones. The Cathrin students naturally gravitated toward weaving techniques, planning elaborate cocoon-like structures that would protect them from the elements. The aquatic students from Myrtle were already sketching bubble-shaped designs that would maintain proper moisture levels. Each species drew upon their evolutionary advantages and cultural knowledge to approach the problem. Kevin pulled out his tablet and began sketching, but his drawings looked nothing like the simple shelter designs his classmates were creating. Instead, he was mapping out complex diagrams that seemed to spiral deeper and deeper into the asteroid's surface. His fingers moved quickly across the screen as he calculated load-bearing ratios, ventilation requirements, and power distribution. Systems, Lisa Park, the human student sitting 2 rows ahead, turned around and caught a glimpse of Kevin's work. Her eyes widened as she saw the intricate plans taking shape on his screen. She had known Kevin since their first year at the Institute and recognized the intensity that came over him when he was solving a particularly challenging problem. But this looked like something far beyond the scope of a simple shelter assignment. Professor Zixthara began calling out the individual assignments, directing each student to their designated section of the asteroid. Kevin listened carefully as she described his allocated area, noting that it was located on the northern hemisphere where preliminary scans had detected interesting geological formations. The professor seemed to pause slightly when she reached his name, as if remembering something about human approaches to problem-solving that she had encountered before. As the briefing concluded, students began filing out of the lecture hall toward the transport bays where shuttles waited to take them to the testing site. Kevin remained in his seat for a few extra moments, staring at his tablet screen and making final adjustments to his plans. The other students' conversations echoed around him as they discussed their straightforward approaches to the assignment. Velkar paused near Kevin's seat, his compound eyes studying the human's tablet screen with curiosity. Your design appears more complex than necessary for basic shelter requirements, he observed in his clicking native language, translated through the universal device. Are you certain this approach will be efficient? Kevin looked up at his insectoid classmate and smiled, the expression unique to human faces. I guess we'll find out, he replied simply, closing his tablet and gathering his things. Sometimes the best solution isn't the obvious one. As Kevin walked toward the transport bay, his mind was already on the asteroid, envisioning the possibilities that lay beneath its rocky surface. While his classmates prepared for a survival exercise, Kevin was preparing for something much more ambitious. He carried with him not just the engineering knowledge he had learned at the Institute, but the collective wisdom of human civilization, the drive to build communities, and the instinct to create something lasting and meaningful, the transport shuttle hummed to life as students settled into their seats for the journey to XK739 through the viewing ports. The asteroid grew larger as they approached, its surface becoming more detailed with each passing moment. Kevin pressed his face to the window, studying every crater and rock formation, his human eyes seeing potential where others saw only challenge. Professor Zixtara made one final announcement over the transport's communication system. Remember, students, this exercise tests not only your technical skills but your ability to think clearly under pressure. The most elegant solution is often the simplest one. You have 72 hours beginning the moment you set foot on the asteroid surface. Kevin nodded along with the other students, but inside his mind, he was already breaking ground on something that would challenge every assumption about what constituted an elegant solution to the problem of survival. The shuttle touched down on the rocky surface of XK739 with a gentle thud that barely registered in the thin atmosphere. Kevin stepped out onto the asteroid's surface, his environmental suit automatically adjusting to the harsh conditions. The gravity was lighter than Earth normal, making each step feel almost bouncy as he surveyed his assigned area around him. Other students were already getting to work on their assigned sections of the asteroid. Through his helmet's communication system, he could hear the excited chatter of his classmates as they began gathering materials and laying out the foundations for their shelters. The urgency in their voices suggested they all understood the 72-hour deadline was not generous for the task ahead. Kevin set down his equipment pack and pulled out the scanning device provided by the Institute. While his classmates immediately began surface construction, Kevin spent the first hour conducting a thorough survey of his entire allocated area. The scanner revealed fascinating details about the geological composition beneath his feet, information that most students would consider irrelevant for a simple shelter assignment. The underground structure of this section was far more complex than the surface suggested. Kevin discovered a network of natural caverns about 15 meters below the surface, connected by narrow passages that could be widened with careful excavation. More importantly, his scans revealed underground water sources, mineral deposits rich in conductive materials, and stable rock formations that could support significant construction. Lisa Park, monitoring the exercise from the observation station, watched Kevin's progress through the remote sensors with growing fascination. While other students had already begun assembling the walls of their basic shelters, Kevin was still walking around his area, taking measurements and making detailed notes on his tablet. To outside observers, it appeared he was wasting precious time that could be spent on actual construction. Professor Zixtara and her fellow instructors were also watching Kevin with concern. The human student's methodical approach seemed inefficient compared to his classmates' immediate action. Velkar had already begun weaving the framework for his cocoon shelter using specially treated asteroid minerals. Aquilin was busy shaping a bubble-like structure that would maintain the precise humidity levels her species required. Even the normally slow-moving Torgan students were making visible progress on their stone shelters. Kevin finally began his excavation, but instead of the shallow foundation most students were digging, he started what appeared to be a deep shaft straight down into the asteroid's surface. Using the provided excavation tools, he carefully removed layers of rock and debris, following the natural fault lines he had identified during his survey. His movements were precise and purposeful, each scoop of material removed with careful consideration for the structural integrity of the surrounding rock. As the first day progressed, the difference between Kevin's approach and that of his classmates became increasingly apparent. The other students had functional shelters taking shape above ground. Zephyr's containment field shelter was nearly complete, a shimmering bubble of energy that would protect the gas being from the asteroid's harsh environment. The Kethrin students worked together to create elaborate woven structures that demonstrated their species' natural architectural instincts. Kevin's excavation site, by contrast, looked like little more than a large hole in the ground. There was no visible shelter, no protection from the elements, and certainly nothing that would meet the basic requirements of the assignment. The monitoring professors began to whisper among themselves, wondering if the human student had misunderstood the task entirely, but Kevin was far from confused about the assignment. As he worked, his human brain was processing the underground environment in ways his alien classmates could not comprehend. Each shovelful of rock he removed was part of a larger plan that would transform this barren section of asteroid into something unprecedented. His excavation was not random digging, but the foundation of a complex engineering project. By the end of the first day, Kevin had created what appeared to be a central shaft about 3 meters wide and 10 meters deep. From this main shaft he had begun excavating smaller tunnels in several directions, following the natural cave systems he had identified earlier. The work was physically demanding, even in the reduced gravity, but Kevin's determination never wavered. The other students settled into their completed, or nearly completed shelters for the night, their basic needs for protection and comfort adequately met. They activated heating systems, sealed their environments against the thin atmosphere, and prepared to rest comfortably until morning. Their shelters were functional, efficient, and perfectly suited to the 72-hour survival requirement. Kevin spent his first night in a small chamber he had carved off the main shaft, barely large enough for him to lie down. To outside observers, it appeared he was failing the assignment completely. His living space was cramped, rough-hewn, and far less comfortable than the proper shelters his classmates had constructed. The monitoring equipment showed his vital signs remained stable, but his accommodation level was clearly below standard. However, Kevin's rough first night was simply the necessary beginning of something much larger. As he lay in his carved-out space, his tablet glowed with detailed plans for what would become the most ambitious construction project in the history of the Institute's survival exercises. His human perspective on community, sustainability, and long-term planning was about to transform a simple assignment into a demonstration of species-level thinking. The second day began with Kevin emerging from his shaft to gather specific materials from the asteroid's surface. But unlike his classmates who had collected rocks and minerals for basic construction, Kevin was selecting materials for specialized purposes. He gathered reflective minerals that could channel light, conductive materials for power distribution, and particular rock types that would provide structural strength for his expanding underground complex. As he worked, Kevin began to reveal the true scope of his project. The main shaft was not his shelter, but the central hub of what would become a multi-level underground facility. From this central point, he was excavating chambers for different purposes, each one carefully planned and precisely executed. His movements underground became more confident as he followed his surveyed routes, creating spaces that served specific functions in his overall design. Professor Zixthara watched the monitoring displays with growing amazement as Kevin's excavation revealed itself to be far more complex than anyone had imagined. The sensors showed a growing network of chambers and passages beneath the asteroid's surface, all connected to the central shaft in a pattern that demonstrated sophisticated planning and engineering, knowledge the other students continued to refine. Their above-ground shelters, adding comfort features and ensuring their systems would function reliably for the remaining test period. Their approaches were sensible, practical, and completely adequate for the stated requirements of the assignment. They had solved the problem of 72-hour survival with elegant simplicity and minimal resource expenditure. Kevin, working alone in his expanding underground complex, was solving an entirely different problem. His project addressed not just survival but the creation of sustainable living space that could support long-term habitation. Every chamber he carved, every tunnel he excavated, was part of a vision that went far beyond the scope of the original assignment. As the second day ended, the monitoring professors began to realize they were witnessing something extraordinary taking shape beneath the asteroid's surface. The second day brought dramatic changes to Kevin's underground project that left the monitoring professors speechless. What had appeared to be simple excavation the day before now revealed itself as the foundation of something unprecedented in the Institute's history. Kevin emerged from his central shaft as the artificial dawn began, his environmental suit dusty but his movements energetic and purposeful. Professor Zixtara called an emergency meeting of the evaluation committee as the sensor readings from Kevin's section continued to show expanding underground activity. The network of chambers and tunnels beneath the surface had grown significantly overnight, following patterns that suggested careful planning rather than random digging. Other professors joined the monitoring station to witness what was becoming the most unusual survival exercise response ever recorded. Kevin began the day by addressing one of the most fundamental needs of any underground facility: lighting. Using the reflective minerals he had gathered, he carefully positioned them throughout his chambers to create a natural illumination system. The minerals caught the weak sunlight from the surface and channeled it down through precisely carved shafts, bouncing the light from chamber to chamber in a network that brought visibility to even the deepest areas of his complex. The main level of Kevin's underground facility had taken shape around a central common area that could comfortably accommodate dozens of people. The space was carved with smooth walls and featured natural seating areas carved directly from the asteroid's rock. The ceiling was higher than necessary for one person, suggesting Kevin was thinking far beyond the individual survival requirements of the assignment. Connected to this central area, Kevin had excavated what could only be described as individual living quarters. Each chamber was precisely sized for comfortable habitation, with carved sleeping platforms, storage alcoves, and even decorative elements carved into the walls. The attention to detail was remarkable, with each room featuring unique patterns and designs that showed Kevin was thinking about comfort and aesthetics, alongside basic functionality, but the true innovation became apparent as Kevin began working on the facility's water system. His initial survey had revealed underground springs, and Kevin had spent considerable effort connecting these natural water sources to his complex. He carved channels and collection pools that would provide clean, fresh water throughout the facility, with overflow systems that prevented flooding and filtration areas that ensured water quality. Lisa Park, watching from the observation station, found herself amazed by the scope of Kevin's vision. She had expected her fellow human to approach the assignment with typical Earth pragmatism, but Kevin was demonstrating something far more ambitious. His underground complex was beginning to resemble the early colonial settlements that humans had built on difficult worlds, designed not just for survival but for establishing permanent communities. The food production area that Kevin carved on the lower level of his complex showcased his understanding of sustainable living systems. Using the mineral-rich soil he had excavated and the consistent temperature of the underground environment, Kevin created growing chambers that could support hydroponic agriculture. He connected these chambers to his water system and positioned them to receive optimal lighting from his reflection network. Kevin's waste management system demonstrated the closed-loop thinking that humans brought to challenging environments. He carved processing chambers that would convert organic waste into fertilizer for his growing areas, creating a sustainable cycle that could support long-term habitation. The system was simple but effective, using natural decomposition processes enhanced by the controlled underground environment. As the day progressed, Kevin added features that went far beyond survival requirements and entered the realm of community planning. He carved a workshop area equipped with tool storage and work surfaces, suggesting he was thinking about ongoing construction and maintenance projects. The space included storage for raw materials and even designated areas for different types of manufacturing activities. The communication center that Kevin carved near the main common area featured acoustically designed chambers that would amplify sound and allow for long-distance communication throughout the complex. The carved channels followed mathematical principles that would ensure clear voice transmission between different areas, creating an internal communication network that required no electronic equipment. Professor Zixthara and her colleagues watched in disbelief as their instruments detected the expanding complexity of Kevin's underground facility. What had started as a simple shelter assignment had become a masterclass in sustainable architecture that surpassed many established colony installations. The sensor readings showed chambers for storage, workshop areas, food production, water management, and living spaces that could accommodate a significant population. Kevin's approach to the assignment was revealing fundamental differences in how humans approach problems compared to other species. While his classmates had focused on meeting the specific requirements of 72-hour individual survival, Kevin was solving the larger problem of how to establish sustainable human presence in hostile environments. His underground complex addressed not just immediate needs but long-term community requirements. The most impressive aspect of Kevin's work was his power generation system. He had identified geothermal activity during his initial survey and spent considerable effort channeling this natural energy into his complex. Using conductive minerals he had gathered from the surface, Kevin created a simple but effective energy collection system that could power lighting, ventilation, and other essential systems indefinitely. The energy storage system Kevin carved into his complex demonstrated his understanding of sustainable engineering principles. He created chambers filled with specially arranged conductive minerals that could store surplus energy from his geothermal system, ensuring consistent power availability throughout the facility. The system was elegant in its simplicity yet sophisticated in its application of natural energy sources. As the second day drew to a close, Kevin's underground complex had grown into something that challenged every assumption about the survival exercise. His classmates had completed their basic shelters and were resting comfortably in their functional but simple accommodations. Kevin was installing finishing touches on a facility that could serve as the foundation for permanent colonization of the asteroid. The evaluation committee found themselves facing an unprecedented situation. Kevin had not merely completed the assignment, but had redefined what the assignment could mean. His underground complex addressed every aspect of sustainable habitation while demonstrating engineering principles that could be applied to colony development throughout the galaxy. Jake Wilson, the human cultural liaison, arrived at the monitoring station as reports of Kevin's project reached the Institute's administration. His first glimpse of the sensor readings left him stunned by the scope of what Kevin had accomplished in just 2 days. The underground facility rivaled established colony installations in complexity and exceeded them in sustainability features. Professor Zixthara realized that Kevin's project was becoming something far more significant than a student exercise. His underground complex was demonstrating human approaches to engineering and community planning that could revolutionize how the galactic community thought about colonization and sustainable development. The simple survival exercise had become a window into human civilization's most fundamental strengths. As night fell on the asteroid, Kevin made final adjustments to his lighting system, ensuring that his underground complex would remain comfortably illuminated throughout the darkness. His 2-day construction project had created not just shelter, but a foundation for civilization that could support dozens of inhabitants for years to come. The third and final day of the survival exercise began with Kevin making refinements to his underground complex that demonstrated the full scope of human engineering philosophy. While his classmates prepared to present their functional but basic shelters to the evaluation committee, Kevin was installing advanced systems that turned his excavation into a permanent installation, capable of supporting a thriving community. Professor Zixtara had called in additional observers from across the Institute as word spread about the extraordinary project taking shape beneath the asteroid's surface. Representatives from the engineering, architecture, and colonial planning departments gathered at the monitoring station to witness what was being described as the most ambitious student project in the Institute's millennium-long history. Kevin began the final day by completing his air circulation system, a network of carefully carved channels that would maintain perfect atmospheric conditions throughout his complex. The system used natural convection principles enhanced by the geothermal energy he had harnessed, creating air currents that would prevent stagnation and ensure fresh breathing conditions in every chamber. The design was so effective that it actually improved upon the atmospheric quality compared to the asteroid's thin surface atmosphere. The transportation system Kevin had carved throughout his complex showcased his understanding of long-term accessibility needs. He had created gently sloped ramps and corridors that would allow easy movement between levels, with wider passages in critical areas that could accommodate equipment transport or emergency evacuation. The layout demonstrated forethought about how the facility would function when populated by multiple inhabitants. Over extended periods, Kevin's emergency systems revealed the depth of his planning for community safety and resilience. He had carved multiple exit routes from every major chamber, ensuring that no area of the complex could become isolated in case of structural problems or other emergencies. Emergency supply storage areas were distributed throughout the facility, stocked with materials that could support inhabitants during crisis situations. The most remarkable addition to Kevin's complex was his expansion planning area, where he had begun preliminary excavation for future growth. The chamber contained detailed carvings on the walls that served as blueprints for additional living quarters, workshop spaces, and community areas. Kevin had not only built for current needs but had created a foundation that could grow to accommodate a larger population as circumstances required. Lisa Park arrived with the formal evaluation team, her amazement at Kevin's achievement evident. As she transmitted reports back to Earth's diplomatic mission, she described a facility that surpassed many established human colonies in sophistication and sustainability, created by a single individual using basic tools in just 3 days. Her reports emphasized that Kevin's approach represented fundamental human characteristics that could benefit galactic civilization. The cultural center Kevin had carved near his main common area demonstrated human understanding of community psychological needs alongside physical requirements. The space featured areas for gathering, recreational activities, and even artistic expression, with carved surfaces that could display community artwork or important information. Kevin understood that successful long-term habitation required attention to mental and social well-being, not just survival needs. Kevin's food production system had evolved into a sophisticated agricultural facility that could support the nutritional needs of a significant population indefinitely. The hydroponic chambers featured multiple growing areas for different types of crops, with nutrient cycling systems that maximize productivity while minimizing resource consumption. The facility could produce fresh food continuously, ensuring dietary variety and nutritional completeness for inhabitants. The manufacturing capability Kevin had built into his complex demonstrated human adaptability and self-sufficiency philosophy. His workshop areas included tool-making stations, material processing equipment carved from asteroid resources, and storage for ongoing construction projects. The facility could produce its own tools, furniture, and equipment, reducing dependence on outside supply chains that might be unreliable for remote installations. Jake Wilson, the human observer, found himself struggling to find words to describe Kevin's achievement as he toured the underground complex with the evaluation committee. The facility represented the culmination of thousands of years of human engineering evolution, from the earliest cave dwellings to the most advanced colonial installations. Kevin had instinctively recreated the essential elements of human civilization. In his underground complex, Professor Zixthara led the evaluation team through Kevin's archive room, where he had carved detailed records of his construction process, maintenance procedures, and operational guidelines. The documentation was so thorough that another individual could understand and maintain the entire complex using Kevin's carved instructions. This knowledge preservation demonstrated human understanding that great projects must be transferable to others for long-term success. The sustainability features throughout Kevin's complex impressed the evaluation committee with their elegance and effectiveness. Every system was designed to operate indefinitely using renewable resources, with backup systems and redundancies that ensured continued operation even if primary systems failed. The complex could function independently for decades without external support, a remarkable achievement for a 3-day construction project. Kevin's approach to the assignment had revealed fundamental differences between human and alien thinking about survival and community development. While other species had focused on meeting immediate individual needs efficiently, Kevin had addressed the broader question of how to establish sustainable human presence in challenging environments. His solution demonstrated human instincts for community building, long-term planning, and comprehensive problem-solving. The evaluation committee found themselves facing an unprecedented situation as they prepared their assessment of Kevin's project. The standard criteria for judging survival shelters seemed inadequate when applied to a facility that exceeded the requirements by such a massive degree. Kevin had not simply completed the assignment but had redefined what was possible within the stated parameters. As the 72-hour deadline approached, Kevin made final adjustments to his complex's systems and conducted a complete operational test of all major functions. Water flowed cleanly through his distribution network. Lights illuminated every chamber through his reflection system. Air circulated properly throughout the facility, and his power generation system maintained steady energy production. The underground complex functioned flawlessly as a complete habitation facility. The other students had completed their presentations to the evaluation committee, demonstrating shelters that met all requirements for individual 72-hour survival. Their projects were competent, efficient, and perfectly adequate for the stated assignment goals. Velkar's woven shelter had impressed evaluators with its elegant simplicity, while Aquilin's bubble habitat had showcased sophisticated atmospheric control appropriate for her species' needs. Kevin's presentation would be different from anything the evaluation committee had ever witnessed. His project challenged basic assumptions about the assignment while demonstrating capabilities that suggested new possibilities for galactic colonization efforts. The underground complex represented not just individual achievement but a window into human civilization's approach to conquering hostile environments through community building and sustainable development. Professor Zixthara prepared to conduct the final evaluation of Kevin's project, knowing that her assessment would need to address not just technical achievement but the broader implications of human engineering philosophy for galactic civilization. Kevin had shown that humans brought unique perspectives to survival challenges, perspectives that could benefit all species working to establish sustainable presence in difficult environments throughout the galaxy. The evaluation committee descended into Kevin's underground complex through the main shaft, their various forms adapting to the carved ramps and passages that Kevin had designed for multi-species accessibility. Professor Zixthara led the procession, her crystalline body reflecting the ingenious lighting system that illuminated every corner of the facility with natural sunlight channeled from the surface. Dr. Helen Carter, the human liaison to the Galactic Institute, joined the evaluation team as both observer and cultural interpreter. Her role was to help the alien professors understand the context behind Kevin's achievement, explaining human approaches to engineering and community development that might seem unusual to species with different evolutionary backgrounds and social structures. The tour began in Kevin's central common area, where the committee members found themselves in a space that could comfortably accommodate several dozen individuals. The carved seating areas, decorative wall patterns, and acoustically designed ceiling demonstrated attention to psychological and social needs alongside basic functionality. Professor Zixthara noted that most species would have considered such amenities unnecessary for a survival exercise. Kevin stood quietly in the center of his creation as the evaluation committee examined every aspect of his underground complex. His calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the amazement visible on the faces of his evaluators, who were discovering engineering solutions and design philosophies they had never encountered before. Each chamber revealed new innovations that challenged their understanding of survival requirements. The committee spent considerable time examining Kevin's water management system, marveling at the elegant integration of natural springs, distribution channels, and purification processes. The system could provide clean water for dozens of inhabitants indefinitely, using renewable sources and natural filtration methods that required no external power or maintenance. Several committee members took detailed readings to document the system's effectiveness. Dr. Carter explained to the alien professors that Kevin's approach represented fundamental human characteristics developed over millions of years of evolution. Humans had survived as a species by building communities, planning for the future, and creating sustainable systems that could support multiple generations. Kevin's underground complex demonstrated these instincts applied to the challenge of extraterrestrial habitation. The food production areas impressed the evaluation committee with their sophistication and productivity potential. Kevin had created growing chambers that could support varied agriculture, with nutrient cycling systems that maximized efficiency while minimizing waste. The hydroponic setup could produce fresh food continuously, ensuring both nutritional completeness and psychological satisfaction for inhabitants, who would otherwise depend on processed supplies. Professor Zixthara found herself particularly fascinated by Kevin's manufacturing capabilities, which demonstrated human self-sufficiency philosophy in action. The workshop areas included everything needed to produce tools, furniture, and equipment from asteroid resources, reducing dependence on external supply chains that might be unreliable for remote installations. This level of independence was remarkable for what had started as a simple survival exercise. The archive room drew significant attention from the evaluation committee as they examined Kevin's detailed documentation of construction processes, maintenance procedures, and operational guidelines. The carved records were so thorough that the facility could be understood and maintained by individuals who had not participated in its construction. This knowledge preservation demonstrated human understanding that successful projects must be transferable to others. Jake Wilson, documenting the evaluation for the human diplomatic mission, found himself amazed by the committee members' reactions to Kevin's achievement. Professors who had seen thousands of student projects over centuries of teaching were struggling to find appropriate ways to assess something that exceeded their evaluation criteria by such a massive degree. Kevin had redefined the parameters of the assignment itself. The emergency systems throughout Kevin's complex revealed his comprehensive approach to community safety and resilience. Multiple exit routes from every chamber, distributed emergency supply storage, and backup systems for all critical functions demonstrated planning for crisis situations that could threaten inhabitants. The committee noted that many established colonies lacked such thorough emergency preparations. Kevin's geothermal power generation system impressed the committee with its elegance and sustainability. Using natural energy sources and mineral-based storage systems, the facility could maintain consistent power for lighting, ventilation, and other essential functions indefinitely. The surplus energy capacity suggested Kevin had planned for future expansion and increased power requirements as the community grew. When asked to explain his approach to the assignment, Kevin's response revealed the fundamental difference between human and alien thinking about survival challenges. The assignment was to build a shelter for survival, he said simply. But humans don't just survive, we thrive. We build communities, we plan for the future, and we create spaces where people can live with dignity and purpose. I couldn't just build a basic shelter knowing I could create something that would actually improve lives. Dr. Carter translated Kevin's explanation into broader context for the alien professors, emphasizing that his response represented species-level characteristics rather than individual innovation. Humans instinctively approach survival challenges as community problems, requiring comprehensive solutions that address not just immediate needs but long-term sustainability and growth potential. This perspective offered valuable insights for galactic colonization efforts. The evaluation committee spent hours examining every aspect of Kevin's underground complex, taking measurements, documenting systems, and trying to understand the principles behind his design decisions. The facility represented engineering achievement that surpassed many professional installations, created by a single student using basic tools in just 3 days of intensive work. Professor Zixtara prepared her assessment knowing that Kevin's project had challenged fundamental assumptions about the assignment while demonstrating capabilities that could revolutionize galactic approaches to sustainable development. The underground complex was not just a student exercise but a demonstration of human engineering philosophy that could benefit all species working to establish presence in hostile environments. The final evaluation session brought together representatives from multiple academic departments as news of Kevin's achievements spread throughout the institute. His project had become a case study in human approaches to engineering, community planning, and sustainable development that would be studied for generations. The simple survival exercise had revealed capabilities that suggested new possibilities for interspecies cooperation and colonization efforts. The evaluation committee unanimously awarded Kevin the highest honors in the Institute's history. But, more importantly, his underground complex became a permanent installation used for training students from across the galaxy. The facility served as a practical demonstration of human engineering principles, showing how comprehensive planning and community-focused thinking could transform basic survival into the foundation for thriving civilization. Professor Zixtara concluded her formal report with observations that would influence galactic policy for years to come. The human student did not misunderstand the assignment, she wrote. Rather, he understood it so completely that he revealed the limitations of our own thinking. When tasked with survival, humans instinctively create the conditions for an entire civilization to flourish. This perspective offers valuable lessons for all species working to establish sustainable presence beyond their homeworlds. Kevin's underground complex remained as a testament to human ingenuity and community spirit, visited by students and professionals who came to understand how one species' approach to survival had created something that exceeded all expectations, and demonstrated the value of thinking beyond immediate requirements to create lasting solutions for future generations.